Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. Jonathan Kessler stood by the window of his modest post-presidential office, staring at the bleak, overcast sky. The rain had been pouring relentlessly since his successor, Lydia Ortiz, had taken the oath of office. A cold, bitter drizzle, a reflection of how he felt about the state of the world, and more importantly, his place in it. 2 terms as President of the United States, and now he was a footnote in history. Another name on the long list of leaders who had their time, made their mark, and were cast aside. But it was more than just the loss of power, it was the loss of purpose. He turned from the window and sat at his desk, the worn leather chair creaking under his weight. The office was small, far from the grandeur of the Oval Office. Here, in this stripped-down space, Kessler spent his days poring over global reports, geopolitical analyses, and the occasional interview request from media outlets that still remembered him. But what had haunted him most since stepping down was the feeling that something was coming. It wasn't true just the usual transition jitters he had felt those before, but something far more ominous. He sensed it in the way world leaders were behaving, in the whispers of military officers who seemed too tight-lipped for comfort. The hum of his phone interrupted his thoughts. He picked it up, the screen flashing a familiar name, General Alex Rivera. Rivera had been his Secretary of Defense, a trusted ally during his presidency, and a man who had warned him of the gathering storm long before anyone else had seen it. "Jonathan, Rivera's," a gravelly voice said, cutting through the static. "We need to meet it. Stuff's happening." Kessler's heart quickened. "What's us happening?" "The Xylox." Kessler's breath hitched. The name had been whispered in dark corners of military intelligence for years, a possible extraterrestrial threat that had been kept under wraps. The Xylox were supposed to be a myth, a far-off bougie man. But if Rivera was calling now, it meant the threat had finally arrived. The skies over Washington D.C. darkened in an unnatural way. It wasn't the typical twilight, but something more foreboding. Kessler watched from the roof of the old apartment building he now called home, a far cry from the White House. High above, metallic shapes descended from the clouds, alien ships, massive and gleaming, their surfaces shimmering with a strange otherworldly light. They were here, Rivera had said during their covert meeting earlier that day. And now, seeing it with his own eyes, Kessler knew that this wasn't some half-baked conspiracy theory. It was real. He felt a cold sweat break out across his skin. Years of preparation, contingency plans for every conceivable crisis. Yet this, an actual alien invasion, was beyond anything he had ever imagined. The newly sworn-in President Ortiz had yet to address the public, and as the world watched the live broadcasts of these ships, descending chaos reigned. Kessler could already feel the panic rippling through the city streets below. People would be looking for answers, and they would find none. He pulled out his phone and dialed Rivera again. "What song the plan?" "Rivera, didn't he waste time on pleasantries? We can't rely on the government. Our Tierras is paralyzed. They were scrambling to figure out what to do, but they don't have time. We need to move now." "Who do we have?" "Not enough, but there's resistance forming, and we pulling people in from all corners, military, intelligence, even civilians who've been preparing for this." "I'll help you," Kessler said, the resolve in his voice stronger than it had been in months. "You were going to have to do more than help, Jonathan. You were going to have to lead." As night fell, the invasion began in earnest. The Xylox wasted no time, their ships hovering over major cities around the world. Their first strike wasn't an all-out assault, but a precision attack on Earth's satellite network. Within hours, global communications were in disarray. News stations flickered and died. The internet slowed to a crawl, and military channels were cut off. Humanity's greatest tool, information, was being systematically dismantled. In his small war room, Kessler huddled with Rivera, Lena Chen, a tech mogul, who had worked with Kessler during his presidency, and Sophia Blake, an intelligence officer who had seen more than her share of black ops. They had gathered as many resources as they could, old military contacts off the grid communication systems, and a network of underground operatives willing to fight back. "This is just the beginning," Lena said, her eyes glued to a holographic map of the Earth that flickered on the table before them. Red dots signifying Xylox ships hovered over major city New York, Tokyo, Moscow, London. "They're dismantling our defenses one by one." Sophia, ever pragmatic, chimed in. "They were not just dismantling, they were watching us, learning. They know more about our weaknesses than we do." Kessler clenched his jaw. Then we need to make sure they don't relearn anymore. What's our first move? Rivera leaned forward, his fingers tracing a path on the map. We go underground. Literally, our first strike needs to hit them where they weakest on the ground. We have teams ready to sabotage their control systems in key locations. But we need to do it fast before they fully establish their hold. Kessler nodded. Let's do it. It was chaos on the streets of New York City. Xylox patrol ships hovered low, their eerie, silent presence casting a shadow over the once vibrant city. People ran in all directions, unsure of where to go or how to protect themselves. The Xylox hadn't begun abducting civilians, but everyone knew it was only a matter of time. Kessler and his team moved through the city's thin underbelly, using old subway tunnels and forgotten infrastructure to avoid detection. The team was small but highly trained former soldiers, hackers, and those willing to risk their lives for the resistance. Emily, Kessler's daughter, was among them. Dad, Emily said, her voice tense but steady as they moved through the darkness. Are you sure about this? The government still has resources. They won't do anything in time, Kessler interrupted, his voice firm but not unkind. Ortiz is too scared of making the wrong move. By the time they act, the Xylox will have control. This is the only way. Emily didn't respond immediately, but Kessler could sense her frustration. She had always challenged him, even when he was president. It was one of the things he admired about her, even if it made their relationship difficult at times. As they reached their destination, a hidden Xylox relay station buried beneath the city, Kessler's thoughts turned to the bigger picture. The strike was important, but it was only the beginning. The Xylox weren't here for resources alone. They wanted something more, something hidden in humanity. Its very DNA. The team breached the relay station's outer defenses with ease. The Xylox technology was advanced, but Lena had figured out a way to disable their encryption temporarily. As the doors slid open with a hiss, the team moved in, weapons drawn. Inside, the relay station hummed with alien energy. Strange organic-looking machines pulsed with light, and the air was thick with an unfamiliar odor, something metallic yet strangely alive. We need to disable their control systems, Sophia whispered, her eyes scanning the room. If we can disrupt their coordination here, it'll give the rest of the resistance time to organize. Kessler nodded and gave the signal. The team spread out, placing explosives at key points throughout the station. Lena worked on hacking into the Xylox's biocomputers, her fingers flying across a holographic interface. Just as they were about to finish, a low guttural sound echoed through the station. Kessler's heart raced. The Xylox had found them. Move now, he shouted, grabbing Emily's arm and pulling her toward the exit. The team scattered, sprinting back toward the subway tunnels as the alien creatures emerged from the shadow. Kessler didn't look back as the explosives detonated, shaking the ground beneath them. The relay station was gone, but the cost of the mission had only just begun. Back in their hidden base, Kessler sat in silence, his mind racing. They had won a small victory, but it wasn't enough. The Xylox were still out there watching, waiting. The world was still in chaos, and he was no longer a president, no longer a man with the power to command armies or a nation. But he was still Jonathan Kessler, and he would find a way to fight back. Kessler paced the dimly lit room, the hum of outdated computers and the soft clinking of weapons being cleaned filling the background. His team was scattered around, recovering from the mission. Lena worked silently, typing rapidly as she decrypted the latest batch of Xylox communications they de-intercepted. Emily sat nearby, inspecting a small injury she'd gotten during their escape. She hadn't said much since their return, but he could sense the tension radiating off her. He approached her, pulling up a chair. You okay? Emily glanced at him, her jaw tight. I am fine. She wrapped a bandage around her arm, her movements deliberate. But he knew her frustration wasn't about the injury. Something on your mind? He asked, his voice calm, though he could already guess what was coming. She looked up, meeting his gaze with a mix of anger and concern. This isn't sustainable, Dad. We got lucky today, but what about next time? And the time after that? They were gonna catch on. And when they do, they'll come for all of us. Kessler sighed, leaning back in his chair. You're right, but what choice do we have? We can just sit back and wait for Ortiz to act. We need to keep pushing, keep fighting. Emily shook her head. And for what? To die underground while the rest of the world waits for salvation that might never come. That's not what this is about, Kessler replied, his voice firmer. We were buying time to find a real solution to hit them where it hurt. Every strike we make weakens their grip on us. We have to give people hope. Hope, Emily Sass's voice was sharper than he expected. People are terrified, Dad. The government is paralyzed. The military can't coordinate, and the Xylox are getting stronger every day. What we did today might not even make a dent. Before Kessler could respond, Lena interrupted from across the room. Actually, it made more than a dent. Both Kessler and Emily turned toward her. Lena pushed her chair back and stood, walking over with a tablet in her hand. The Xylox rely heavily on a network of interconnected biocomputers to control their operation. The relay station we hit wasn't just for communications. It was a hub for coordinating their ground forces in the eastern United States. Without it, they were going to have a hell of a time keeping their units in sync. Kessler raised an eyebrow. How much time were we talking? A few days, maybe a week at most, Lena replied, but it's enough for us to plan our next move. And I found something else, something big. She handed the tablet to Kessler. He glanced at the screen, his eyes narrowing as he read the alien characters Lena had managed to decrypt. What is this? It's a list of coordinates, Lena said. Major cities, some remote locations too. But there's one that stands out. It's in Antarctica. The Xylox have something there and it's heavily protected. Kessler's mind raced. A command center. That's not my guess, Lena replied. But there's more. I also found fragments of data indicating the Xylox are working on something biological. It's not just about resources. They were interested in us and human DNA. Emily leaned forward, her brow furrowed. Why would they want our DNA? Lena shrugged. I don't have all the details yet, but it seems like they were looking for a way to adapt their species, to absorb certain human traits. They might be dying off, and they see us as their salvation. Kessler felt a chill run down his spine. The idea that the Xylox weren't just here to conquer but to manipulate humanity on a genetic level was far more terrifying than anything he'd imagined. So what do we do? Lena hesitated before answering. We hit them before they can finish whatever they replanning. If that facility in Antarctica is what I think it is, it could be their main research base. We take it out and we cripple their ability to experiment on us. Kessler nodded. We'll need everything we've got for this. It's not going to be easy. Rivera, who had been standing silently near the back of the room, finally spoke. I'll mobilize our best people, but we're going to need outside help. We can do this alone. Kessler thought for a moment, then made his decision. Reach out to our contacts overseas. There are still some military units that haven't been fully cut off yet. If we can coordinate with them, we might stand a chance. The cold wind bit at Kessler, Sace, as he stood at the edge of the makeshift airstrip, watching the horizon as the small fleet of aircraft approached. It had taken days of planning secret negotiations and the coordination of multiple resistance groups from around the world, but they had finally gathered the forces they needed for the assault on Antarctica. As the planes touched down, Kessler felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, their one shot to disrupt the Xylox plans before it was too late. Rivera approached him, his face grim but determined. The team sunk ready. We've got about 50 operatives and support staff. It's not much, but it sends the best. We've got. It'll have to be enough, Kessler replied, his gaze still fixed on the planes. What's the weather forecast? Storms are rolling in, could work to our advantage, make it harder for the Xylox to detect us. Kessler nodded, though he knew the storms could just as easily complicate their mission. There was no turning back now. The briefing was short and to the point. Kessler stood before the assembled team in a large tent, the sound of the wind howling outside. Lena had set up a holographic display showing a rough map of the Xylox facility buried deep beneath the Antarctic ice. The Xylox are using this facility to conduct genetic experiments. Kessler began. We don't know the full extent of their plans, but we believe they were trying to find a way to merge human DNA with their own. If they succeed, they could create a new hybrid species, one that's even more dangerous than what we've seen so far. He paused, letting the gravity of the situation sink in. Our mission is to infiltrate the facility, disable their research capabilities, and destroy any data or samples they've collected. We'll be facing heavy resistance, and the terrain is going to be brutal. But if we succeed, we can cripple their invasion efforts and give humanity a fighting chance. The team listened in silence, their faces set in determination. These were people who had lost everything: family, friends, homes. They had nothing left to fight for except survival. Kessler glanced at Emily, who was standing near the front of the group. She met his gaze, and for a moment, he saw the same fire in her eyes that had driven him throughout his career. She was ready. The mission began under the cover of darkness, the storm swirling around them as they made their way toward the Xylox facility. The landscape was a frozen wasteland, jagged ice formations stretching out in every direction. Visibility was low and the wind howled relentlessly, but Kessler knew they had to keep moving. Time was against them. As they neared the entrance to the facility, Lena hacked into the Xylox security systems, disabling the outer defenses. The doors slid open with a hiss, revealing a stark, metallic corridor that led deep into the ice. "Stay sharp," Kessler whispered to the team. The air inside the facility was colder than Kessler had expected, the walls lined with strange organic machines that pulsed with an eerie light. They moved quickly, navigating the twisting corridors until they reached the heart of the complex. Lena stopped at a large reinforced door. "This is it," she said, her fingers flying across her tablet as she worked to bypass the security protocols. "The main research lab is just beyond this door." Kessler's heart pounded in his chest. This was the moment they had been working toward. If they could destroy the lab, they could cripple the Xylox plan. But as the door slid open, revealing the vast chamber beyond, Kessler felt a sense of dread settle over him. The lab was massive, filled with rows of containment pods, each one holding a human subject in stasis. Strange biomechanical tendrils connected the pods to a central machine that pulsed with a sickly green light. Kessler stared in horror. They were already experimenting on them. Lena's face paled as she scanned the data. "This is worse than I thought. They were using human subjects to create a hybrid species. If they perfect this, we are finished." "Then we end it," Kessler said, his voice steely. "Blow the place to hell." As the team set the charges, the Xylox descended upon them, their grotesque forms emerging from the shadows. A fierce battle erupted, gunfire and alien screams echoing through the chamber. Kessler fought alongside his team, knowing that this was their only chance. With the charges set, Kessler gave the signal, "Fall back, now." The team raced toward the exit as the countdown ticked away. Kessler glanced back one last time, watching as the lab exploded in a blaze of fire and light, the central machine crumbling into ash. They made it to the surface, just as the facility collapsed beneath the ice, the ground shaking beneath their feet. The storm raged on, but Kessler felt a surge of hope. They had dealt a critical blow to the Xylox, but the war was far from over. As the team regrouped, Kessler looked out over the frozen wasteland, knowing that this was only the beginning. They had won a battle, but the fight for Earth's future had just begun.